Kate Falcha, welcome to Irish Granny Tarot, and just a very special falcha to my honored guest, Kate Chadbourne, Dr. Kate Chadbourne. Women never get the honorifics. Thank you so much, Kate.
Thank you for having me.
This is such a pleasure.
Delighted to be with you and all of your wonderful people.
This is going to be a thrill. Dr. Chadbourne is what would you call it? Not a historian.
I call myself a folklorist.
Oh, a folklorist. Okay.
Yeah, I'm a scholar of Irish. Yeah, I'm a scholar of Irish folklore and language, as well as I always say to my people, a multi-passionate artist. So I'm a poet, a singer, storyteller, harper, composer, all the things that we all. There it is. There's your lovely little Karsha.
I don't play. You do play.
Yes, I do.
That belongs to my daughter. My daughter,
Sinead. Nice.
she plays. You're a creator. You sing. You play music. You write poetry. You teach Irish. You teach mythology.
I do.
Do you ever have time to stop and take a breath?
You know, I love it all so much, Helen. And I know that's how you feel too. That it really fills my cup. Every single thing I get to do, I really love it. But it is a busy life, but I'd rather have a busy, fun life, which is what I'm having anyway. So,
and I hate to do this to you because I do think there's an awful unimportant emphasis on this sometimes. But as I said, women really have to work harder to get what they get. So I'm going to invoke the H word. You teach at Harvard.
I do teach at Harvard. And so but you're right. I mean, for a long time, I never liked to use the H word because I don't like the whole white tower, and I don't like exclusiveness in education. And I always tell my students, like, scholarship is a team sport and it's best played together and everybody is welcome. And I believe in the falcha, but I am also really, really lucky to have attended Harvard as a graduate student. It's where I got my PhD. And now to teach at Harvard as a professor. So I'm pretty lucky.
What's the reception of the student body? I can't imagine you have 1 trillion students. It boggles my mind that they have this as on offer.
Well, right now, actually, I'm teaching a course called the Irish Supernatural, and we have 65 students. So people are interested. And you know what's exciting is you don't have, the door is open, Irish roots or not. I always say, if you have that, what I call the Irishy feeling, which is a feeling of warmth and a feeling of falcha, of welcome, and interested in people, come on in, So you don't have to have Irish roots or any of that to be interested. And I have students from all over the world, which is really exciting.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
So I could not decide when I was listening to your videos. Were you born in Ireland and you've just been gone a long time? Or
no,
did you go and visit so long that you picked up the accent? You were a little tiny.
I guess it's in there from studying Irish for so many years. But no, I was born here. I lived a couple of years in Ireland, but mostly I think it's just from studying Irish intensively, because really to learn Irish requires a lot of investment, I'll say. It's worth it and it's fun, but you really, sometimes I jokingly say that in order to learn Irish, you need a little lobotomy because it's so different from, right? So it's a Celtic language, and it's so different from English, which is a Germanic language. So if you think, right, so in English, we have a subject, verb, object language, like I see Helen, right? But in Irish, we have a verb, subject, object, which would be see I Helen. So, and there's so many, that's the tip of the iceberg.
The tip of the iceberg.
Yes.
Am I wrong in thinking that it's more closely related to Sanskrit than it is to English? Am I wrong in thinking that?
You are. I'm sad to say. Please forgive me.
Okay.
You are wrong in that. So you probably already know, right? So Sanskrit is one of the Indo-European languages, right? Like under the big umbrella of Indo-European. So we have Germanic, right? And we have the Romance languages. And then we have the Celtic languages, which are the 6 languages. So we have the Q Celtic languages, which are, the reason they're named Q is because the word for head starts with a k sound. So in Irish, ceann or ceann, depending on where you are in Ireland. So we have Irish, some people call it Gaelic, Scottish Gaelic, and Manx Gaelic as well from the Isle of Man. Mm. And then we have the P Celtic languages, which are Welsh, Cornish, and you know what I'm trying to say, Breton. This was me going the west of France. Sorry. So and those are the P Celtic languages. Like, so their word for head is pen. So it's a really insulated, and I could drone on, and I don't want to bore the pants off.
Oh, yeah, it's not boring me. I love this stuff. But I do see what you mean. You triggered a question, and now my mind has gone blank. So you went to Ireland specifically to do Irish.
I did, yes.
How did that happen? I mean, what's your family background? I'm so curious about how people arrive where they land.
Well, you know, my mother's family is from Ireland. My father's family is from England. I was 12 years old when I saw a program on PBS about traditional Irish culture, and it moved me deeply. You know, I was for one. I think it was probably the most pivotal thing. My own grandmother had a few prayers in Irish, but I hadn't heard a lot of Irish. But I was hearing Irish in this program, and I was looking at this traditional way of life that involved people helping each other, that involved storytelling, that involved traditional arts and singing, really ingenious, amazing people. And then, as so many documentaries, there was that kind of, you know, the way they always peak, and then they're like, and then things started to change, and then it all is gone. And I was crying, actually, because I thought, even at 12, I just thought, this should be here. You know, we should still have this. These people are amazing. And that sealed it for me. I wanted to learn about those people. So my own study really is of 19th and early 20th century folklore, although my scholarship through the PhD was medieval as well. But really what I've settled into is looking at the stories and the traditions of people in the 19th and early 20th centuries. And the excitement about that has never waned over so many years. It is a well of endless interest and inspiration, honestly.
Well, there's such a heavy influence, isn't there, in the arts in Ireland? People really value music, creating, writing, the written word.
Yes.
Very important. Even though it's an oral tradition, they certainly transferred over into the written word in a remarkable way.
Yes. The Irish have a genius with language, no question. You know, I would think it's interesting that the Irish language has fewer actual words. Like the English language has more words, but the Irish language uses the words in idioms that are just incredible. You know, one of the little expressions I shared recently, I was looking at Father Dineen's Irish dictionary, and this is a dictionary from the first part of the 20th century. And I was looking at idioms about the sun, and one of them was an Grian Giri, which means the winter sun. And Father Dineen glosses that as something very precious. Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah, it really is. It really
something
is
very precious. And that's the tip of the iceberg. There's so much like that is so beautiful.
I really need to have you speak to my children. Most of them, save one, have Irish names, and I hear about it regularly.
Yes.
Thanks, Mom, because nobody can ever pronounce it. Nobody can ever spell it. You know, that's hilarious.
Oh, but how lovely for them! How lovely for them.
I completely agree. Yeah. Yes. That was one of the creative moments in my life. I was thrilled to be able to do it. Of course, my mother-in-law was horrified, but.
Well, my new kittens, they have Irish names too. Helen has seen my kittens running up the stairs behind me.
I thought I was having an apparition.
But one of them is called Falcha, which is, I think, the most important word in the language, which is welcome. And the other one, I call him Philly, but his real name is Filiocht, which is poetry. So poets, well,
Oh, I love it.
so Philly and Falcha, and it's perfect for them.
Beautiful. So I have a few little questions that I wrote down here to ask you. I saw your double video with is it Laura? Laura? You were on stage. It was a musical thing.
Lauren Passarelli, yes.
Yes, yes. Yeah, that was interesting. And then I was looking at the topics that you've covered. And so you do what's called the Bardic Academy. Tell us about that.
So the Bardic Academy is my school for singers and poets and harpers and piano players. It's hands-on. But my idea, I'm interested in the sort of Bardic way of education, which is really weaving in the person, weaving in a broader frame of reference. So if you're singing, we're talking about, I do teach singing in Irish, and we talk a lot about the folklore and the history and the cultural associations of those songs. And we try to build really not just like a singer, but an artist, a bard, a person who can weave together many arts and influences. So that is, anyway, that's my school that's hands-on, where we do these arts. And then I also have the Celtic Wisdom School, which is where we study Irish tradition, mainly Irish tradition, sometimes a little bit of Welsh as well, with an eye to personal growth and creativity. So it's a little different than what I can do with my Harvard students. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit more emphasis on creativity, which I love.
Do you dip a bit more into the metaphysical?
Oh, for sure we do.
Well,
Oh, yes, of course we do. I just actually finished teaching a course called Sacred Animals of the Celts, and we looked at salmon one week, and then swan the next, and then horse the next. And yes, we're trying to sort of experience what it is like to first just to learn the folklore and the mythology of those animals, but then to kind of embody the essence and take the strength of those creatures and those archetypes into us to see what is possible. And it's so much fun. I love it.
Would you say that most Irish people tend to relate to this on kind of an intuitive way? Because I'll tell you why I ask. I have an 8-year-old granddaughter who's very psychic, and it runs in the family. And I want to ask you about that too. But she recently had it's been a year, had a birthday. And you would think, she's turning 8. And so the little girl's pink and purple, and you know how it is. It's so stereotypical. You know what she chose as her theme? The crow, the raven.
Wow. That was
amazing. And I don't know why, because nobody has spoken to her about it. After the fact, I sent her information and sent her some cards that are the ravens. But I thought that was so interesting because, isn't that the animal familiar of the Morrigan, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The shape that she takes too sometimes.
Yes. Yeah.
In fact, one of the students said, could we have another version of this class and have raven/crow be one of the animals that we look at? So I think we'll have hound and we'll have crow for sure. And we'll probably have cow and bull, because that's a big one.
Important too. Well, I just recently covered an article that I read in the paper about ravens and crows and how they have genetic memory. And if you offend one, their great-great-great-grandchildren will recognize your face. They've studied it. Yeah. Isn't that astounding?
That's so exciting to me, Helen. I really love what we're learning about animal intelligence right now. I think the towering arrogance of human beings over millennia is starting to finally crumble. And Temple Grandin, who wrote that book, I think it's called Are We Intelligent Enough to Recognize the Intelligence of Animals? I'm butchering that title, but
yeah.
It's high time. And that's so exciting. And what we're learning about trees, right? What we're learning about the genius of the natural world right now is truly thrilling to me.
Yeah.
And I bet I love to feel like a creature among creatures. I love to feel like I'm just one part of this whole woven beauty and not the most important part. There is no we're just a creature among creatures. I love that. And I love hearing about your granddaughter. Well done,
I'm
her.
learning learning to be more in touch with that. But for years, I've been the kind of person that I can't watch somebody cut down a tree.
No, me neither.
And I'm not like an overt tree hugger, you know. But I
am actually an overt tree hugger.
I admire that. But I get sick in my stomach. I feel like in fact, I have a janitorial service, and last night I was watering somebody's plants because they haven't been watering them, and I could just hear them, you know, saying, please God, somebody give me some water.
I know.
I just, you know, well,
that's what we're learning really, is that the world is alive in ways that are not maybe as convenient for us as we would like. Right. We would love to say, oh, again, that's just a plant. That's just a tree. That's just a whatever. And what we're learning is nothing is just anything.
No.
And it's so much richer to be in relationship with the world when you are acknowledging its intelligence, its genius, its consciousness.
Well, people are finally willing to admit more of this because they can put it in more scientific, factual, objective terms. But they now understand that the planet is a being of itself, and it's created of systems, and when you put the systems out of balance, that's when things start to happen. But in and of itself, the earth, Gaia, is its own single being. We were talking, I was going to ask you a question. That guy, I can't remember his name. I feel very bad about that. He's got an absolutely gorgeous voice. He's Irish, in Ireland. And he's made a video where he sings in Gaelic to an oak tree, I believe it was.
I haven't seen that. No, I'd love to see that.
I'll find it. I know I can hunt it down. I'll find it and I'll send it to you. The most gorgeous thing I've ever heard. I guess it was one of the oldest trees in Ireland, and they wanted to take it down, and he rallied together people to protect it. But he communes with the trees, and it's so interesting to me.
How beautiful. It's not him, but have you heard of the great Irish storyteller Eddie Lenihan? I would want anyone to know about. I admire him passionately, Eddie Lenihan, and he's been instrumental in protecting fairy thorn trees in Ireland. Yes, and also just he's a great keeper of lore and a great scholar. But you know, some of the fights about cutting down these trees that are associated with Nadini Maya, the good folk, Eddie has spearheaded some of that. So,
well, the good folk are everywhere. My mother was very in tune to that. And I would often catch her outside doing whatever, you know, hanging laundry, working in the yard. I would catch her speaking in Irish to the trees. And I'd say to her, who are you talking to? And, you know, the little people, you know, the wee people there in the tree, can you not see them? And, you know, and that was an avocado tree.
Wow.
So, they're everywhere, you know.
There are so many stories, you know, we've been looking at these in my class where somebody who can see, and a lot of times, oddly enough, it's a priest or a friar in these stories from the 19th and early 20th century. There's a priest or a friar who is out with an ordinary man, and he says, would you like to see them? Because mostly Irish people don't use the word fairy, as you know, right?
Yeah,
they don't. They just say them, or the good folk, or the neighbors.
Right? She.
Well, but even like your average Irish person would just say, if they're speaking in English, they'd say them. If they're speaking in Irish, they'll probably say Nadini Maya, which is the good folk. Sometimes Nadini Bega, sometimes Nadini Ursula. So the little folk or the noble folk. But what's interesting about that, just to say, is Nadini Ursula also means the nobility, like the landlord class. So look at that ambivalence.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
Isn't that
who's really in charge?
Exactly. And it's confusing. So this priest or friar says to the man, would you like to see them? And sometimes he holds up a ring, but often he actually makes a shape with his arm. I'm trying to make a shape with my arm, and says, "Look through there." And when the man looks through the arm of the priest or the friar, he sees that the field is
like a portal.
absolutely, pardon?
Like a portal.
Yes, the field is absolutely full of Nadini Maya, of the folk.
Wow.
And oh goodness, we could talk all day about the fairies. That's kind of my field of scholarship, because
Oh, well, I'm willing to listen.
I
Go
love so the Sheeshkeelte, the fairy legends. That's the stuff that really holds my heart, and it's fascinating. And it's
I
really
like the ones that are not, pardon?
It's really human stuff. You know, I mean, it's magic, but it also brings up the most important parts of our life, the ambivalence and ambiguity, the heartbreak, the transitions, the difficulties. All of that is there. And sadly, you know, sort of when we think about, a lot of times in the United States, when we think about fairies, we think about like Cicely Barker and the flower fairies and the adorable 19th century fairies. Yeah. But that's not the Irish fairies at all. They are, a lot of times they look exactly like us. They're indistinguishable from a person. And that's another thing that makes them interesting and tricky, is that when you never know quite who you're talking to.
That's right. I love that. I'm always more intrigued by not the precious ones, but the more emotionally significant one. We had a cat named Banshee. You know, I like that dark. Yeah, Eeyore is my spirit animal. I like the dark kind of mysterious emotion, more in connection with the other dimensions and the other worlds. I'm less interested in the ones that are living in the flower bed. I'm more interested in the ones that are connecting from elsewhere. I think that's really intriguing.
Know, I always come back to like a saying from Donegal that says, "Oh, we folk in the cliff over yonder, Mollymuch were nanam is jultimage were gujikta. We praise your name and we shun your company." So the idea that like people have today of like, oh, making friends with the fairies, the Irish traditionally did not make friends with the fairies. They were not trying to lure them into the garden. They were just saying, you've got to be correct in your life in some important ways. You know, just as an example that I come back to is, you know, when a 19th century woman was married, ideally she was sent off to live at her husband's house, where her mother-in-law was going to be kind to her, usually for about a year while she tried to get pregnant. And then after that, she was going to be more or less like the hired help, not hired. It was going to be difficult. And it was difficult for the mother, the birth mother of this girl, to say goodbye to her daughter. And one of the stories that I think tells us about how fairies in storytelling come into people's lives tells that one night a mother was missing her daughter. Which, of course, it's not explicitly said, but she wanted to go see her daughter at the new house. And she had some fresh fish. And she set off. And it's interesting because it's Iask Ur. And Ur means
fresh fish. Yes, I know that phrase. Yeah.
But it means Ur also means sexually immature.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, that's just another of the dimensions of that word.
Yeah.
So in a way, and anyway, the mother sets off with this packet of fresh fish. It's not, and it should be Ias Gorch, which is salt fish. That's the right way. And Gorch is also associated with tears and grief. Right. And so in a way, there's this contrast here. So she sets off. Anyway, long story short, she is more or less led on a merry dance by the fairies and ends up more or less in a hedge, wakes up close to her house in the morning, but she's black and blue from falling in a hedge. And the sort of moral of this little tiny story in the Sheeshkeelte from Donegal says, and never again did she try to bring fresh fish to her daughter. Now, that story says to us, she's made an error in the relationship, right? The fairies are in it because she's trying to continue to have a relationship with her daughter that she should no longer have. That doesn't work for 19th century Irish society.
Right, within that
Irish
time.
society, right? So that idea is like she's trying to sort of almost keep that door open. And fairies, when fairies get involved, I always say there's a gap of some kind. Something has gone amiss. You've made an error of some sort. Otherwise, you would not have anything to do with them in these.
Yeah, no, I knew that you have to be very cautious. It's not the cute little beings with those paintings are sweet, but that's not the real reality. I want to wow you with one of my very few sentences in Irish that I learned when I was younger. Tan tiasgur.
Tan tiasgur. Well, that's amazing you knew that, Helen. Wow.
Well, when you said it, I realized I'd forgotten it. Tan bachilan. Pretty good, huh?
You got it. That's very good.
Ishmisha Helen.
Yeah.
See, I'm but I almost
of all the fairy legends that I might have told, that's amazing that we would come up with the Iasgur, because I could be telling you fairy legends for the next 3 days.
Yeah, I know. I can tell. There's no such thing as a coincidence.
I love that. That's amazing and well done. My
Thank you. No, thank you. Guramayaget, right?
You got it. Falterot.
So, have you ever heard of a guy by the name of Jacques Vallée?
I feel like I've heard the name, but no, I don't know.
I'm so interested to get your opinion about this. So he's this French man who is, I believe he was in high tech or engineering, something like that, not a very long time ago, 40 or 50 years ago, and made his millions and decided to pursue his passion, which was global historical lore and mythology and the connection, this is so interesting, the connection with other dimensions and potentially
fascinating
life elsewhere. And he's made a name for himself. In fact, Close Encounters, that movie, the scene at the end with the French man and they're playing the music to attract that's him, that character.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. He wrote a really you would love this book. He wrote a really interesting book called Passport to Magonia, and it's linking every culture's lore and mythology to the potential and religious mystical experiences. So fairies and Fatima and Lourdes,
interesting.
Linking all of them as a kind of a general manifestation of how human beings relate to other entities or dimensions. It's hard to say, what it is. Yeah.
That's interesting. That's fascinating. It makes me think of, at the beginning of the 20th century, a man called W.Y. Evans Wentz wrote a book called Fairy Faith in the Celtic Countries.
Yeah.
And that's a really fascinating book because he says more or less that the fairy folk of each of the Celtic countries are in some ways an emanation of the particular geology and the kind of land that is there. So you have a very, the Welsh fairies are called the Tulwith Teg, the fair folk, and they're quite pliable next to the Irish fairies who are like, we will get you sometime.
Oh, well, there's a big shock. I'm so surprised.
Yeah, I mean, in that country where they sing so beautifully in
you just
harmony.
took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say, did they harmonize?
Yeah,
that's so funny.
But it is fascinating. And, I will say with my Irish supernatural class, my rule of thumb, I say, when someone tells you a supernatural tale, believe them. Just believe them. So sometimes I think people get hung up on questions of belief. When someone tells me a tale, and many people have, of hearing the banshee, I believe them every time.
I do too. Oh, yeah. One of my favorite American folklore stories is the story of Rip Van Winkle, because essentially it's a story of alien abduction. It's a story of connection to the little people. It's just this remarkable tale that people take on the surface but there's so much to it. There's so much more to it. It connects us to a long human history of similar things, you know, similar stories.
Oh,
the bowling
sure.
ball thunder, and you know, I love that. It's so great. So
I find that
question.
really fascinating, actually, that idea of being away, which is what most people in Ireland would say, someone's away with the fairies, which covers a million things, as you know,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Being away with the fairies can be literally being in that other world, but it can also be being distracted. It could be
Or being. Yeah.
Yep, it's beginning to have dementia, perhaps, alcoholism, confusion in your life, right? Yeah, it's interesting. Again, I don't dismiss at all the supernatural aspect of this, and I'm also interested in the way that it expresses, that it helps us talk about states of being, which we all experience at some point, right? Where we're in some kind of ambiguity or ambivalence or transition or difficulty. You know, thinking of a story like that of a young woman who goes, she's in her teens, and she goes to visit this is an Irish story, and she goes to visit a family, and in the night she wakes up and she doesn't know where to use the loo. And she stumbles into the kitchen and she sees all of these people in the kitchen, and they're all sort of laughing and merry. And she grabs a kitchen pot and uses it. She doesn't know what to do. And one of them sees what has happened and throws the kitchen pot with all the contents in it at her, and a shard enters her leg. And she goes back to bed, and in the morning she's feverish and terribly ill. And in fact, her mother is so afraid about this girl that she calls in a banfasa, a wise woman. And the wise woman comes to the house and explains this girl has been in contact with Nadini Maya, with the good folk, and is able to extract the shards of pottery from her leg and heal her. But the end of the story is what really moves me. The woman, imagine it could be you or me, Helen, says to the mother of this young one, when she is traveling, she needs a safe space, and she needs to know where she is, and she needs access to more or less the facilities. We need to look after this young one so this doesn't happen again. And I think there's so much compassion in that. This woman understanding just the confusion of a young one who isn't sure of where she is in the world, right? And
needing guidance,
right? And so the fairies, again, are part of all of that, and how confusing that is to be in a house of people you don't know, and you don't know where to take care of your own needs. And then it's a wise woman, the Banfasa, who is able to come in and explain that, help with the healing, but then say for the future, this is what this young woman needs.
It's interesting. What I find compelling about these sorts of stories, it's like an onion. You have metaphor, you have parable, you have folklore, but you also have very possibly a first person, a true narrative of something that really is happening. And rather than dismiss any of it and limit yourself to the definition of what's going on, you embrace all of it.
That's the best. Well said, Helen. I'm right there with you. That's how I like to do it too. Like you said, the onion, it's all there. There's so many points of entry into a story like that, aren't there?
Yeah, and it's too easy to dismiss a set of beliefs, a belief system.
Absolutely.
Often it's simply a group's understanding from their perspective, but it's like a crystal, many facets, many perspectives. You don't see the whole, you know, and I think we acknowledge, acknowledge that. I have a question before you go, because I know you have a commitment. I wrote this down because I was trying to think what was the one thing that I wish you would be able to share. And being Irish, I'm very sensitive to all offenses and stereotypes against the Irish, but I don't say much about it because it's pointless, you know? So what's the most important thing about the Irish culture, the Irish people, that you wish people knew?
I think I always say the most important thing I wish people knew is the fáilte, is welcome. That to me is the heart of Irish culture. It's the best. It's Ireland's gift to the world is fáilte, is welcome, and making sure that the door is open and that you come as you are and come in among us. I mean, I think we need that in our world so much. And I also think that each of us can practice fáilte. Each of us can decide whoever you are welcome, and open the door to our hearts and enjoy each other, see what's there, make the most of it. I believe what I have seen in Irish culture especially through folklore, is the warmth of that and how deeply creative. It's an art form. It is an art form. So if I could sort of just point anyone in that direction of fáilte, that is my heart's desire, because I think it's the best thing we can take on. And I hope
that's beautiful. That's beautiful to hear. A couple of times that I've been back, I mean, I was born there, moved here as a child, and then I've been back a few times. And the thing that struck me, two things struck me. And first of all, it was the warmth. You're embraced. You're a member of well, I usually was a member of the family, but you're a member of the family, and that you're treated like an honored guest, and people are so concerned about your well-being. Are you comfortable? What can I get you? Let me bring you some tea. It's just, nobody's a stranger. And I think that's, if we need a whole lot more of that in this world. The other thing that it was really significant for me personally, was oftentimes people don't get my sense of humor. And so I often feel like, I probably have three heads or something, you know. I'll say something and people look at me like, what? When I was in Ireland, everybody had that same sense of humor. And I thought, oh my God, it's something genetic. It's cultural. That's where that comes from. It was such a pleasure to be around people who understood what you were saying and gave it right back. The sense of humor. I think that really is valuable.
The wit is incredible, is sharp and funny and sometimes dark, but also oftentimes redeeming. There's that alternating, I think, between the sharp wit and then the kindness. So the leavening, beautiful.
Well, you know, there are plenty in Ireland, usually my male relatives, who think they're funny. They just, you know, they may have overestimated it a little bit, I think. It's absolutely true. There's a quickness with the words, you know, just an ability to pull the humor.
There's no wordsmith like the Irish. Really, I don't think there's anyone else in the world who has that wordsmithery. And just for everyone, you know, it's on tap from everyone. It's not just like, it's not sort of just a specialized class of people. And the same I would say too I have met people in Ireland who are so deeply learned, and they're not attached to a university or a school or anything. They are just deeply curious. And again, I think that interests me a lot, because I see that as kind of, you know, the hedge schools of the 17th and 18th and beginning of the 19th century, and that emphasis on the value of learning that is there too, you know, people learning everything about every part of the world, and classical history and classical learning, classical languages, incredible people.
Yeah, I see that in my own family. There are a lot of autodidacts, people who just took off from very little formal education. My own mother was 17 when her formal education ended. And she lived in the country. She lived in, you know, one of those one-room schoolhouses where the only teacher was a tyrant, you know. So if you were going to learn, it really was up to you yourself. And so I would go to college, and I would come home on Christmas break, and I'd be pretty full of my own intellectual arrogance, you know. And she'd be asking me, what did you do? What did you learn this semester? And I'd be telling her about these literature courses, and I'd mention some. esoteric book that nobody's ever read unless you're in a college class and they're desperate for something new to justify their their existence, you know. And she always knew the book. She'd read it and she knew the minor characters and she could converse about them. And I was always so impressed by that. And
That's
it was
impressive.
Completely self-taught, completely. Yeah.
Oh, you have to love people like that. I do. That really inspires me.
Yeah, it does me too. It reassures me. So I think that this has been such a fun conversation because these are hard times, and it's nice to know that there's a continuing thread throughout a long human history of difficulties. People do prevail, and they prevail.
They do, Helen. They do. You're so right. And I mean, why we turn to tradition, why we look back at Irish tradition and stories and proverbs and wisdom and wit is because it is nourishing and it serves us now. And we really can take it on right now. Again, we can practice falcha. We can take an interest in each other's stories. I think that's a wonderful thing, is just the gift of listening, which is a great quality, you know, to listen for the story and also to share the story, you know, like Antinya na holdo eishtach ni holdo lorch. The one who doesn't know how to listen doesn't know how to speak. That's a
lesson I could learn.
It is a lesson for all of us, actually. And that proverb exists in the opposite. The one who doesn't know how to speak doesn't know how to listen. And I love that the Irish sort of are acknowledging, you know, the circuit of good communication. We could talk all day. I mean, even just the idea, Geary and Birch Boher, two people short in the road, meaning, you know, you can almost get through anything as long as you have someone to talk to and someone you can listen to.
So true.
Right? Just the healing power of conversation, right? Sorry, I could go on forever because I love all these. You're
triggering so many thoughts in my head. My father, who I don't always say terribly flattering things about, but he did have that trait, and I see it in myself, and I see it in a few of my children. They always say, "Mom, you don't have to talk to everybody when we go out." You know, you just never know a stranger, because why would you? People are fascinating.
People are fascinating and good.
Things out.
And good. People are fascinating and good and worth listening to.
I needed to hear that this week because I've been feeling very down about my opinion about the human race the past couple of weeks. So I knew there was a reason I had to talk to you.
I'm glad, Helen. I'm glad. I know we practice, don't we? I always come back to that. We just practice. We practice looking where we want to look and looking for what we like to see. And we can find it, right? When we look and we say, there's a dear human being, like, who has his or her foibles, just like I have mine, and is doing the best she can. And it's actually quite charming, really, when you open up to that dimension of him or her.
It is. No? It is. I don't think I would ever have predicted I would say these kinds of things in a public forum, but I do believe the universe presents us with what we need when we need it, if we just remain awake for it. And that's why you just sort of popped up on my YouTube feed. It was shocking to me. What, somebody who teaches the Irish language? Are you kidding me? So do you do classes online?
I do through through my Celtic Wisdom School. And I'm pretty sure we'll be doing a class called Welcome Home to Irish in the spring. And I'm definitely going to be teaching a class called the Gaelic Conspiracy, which is all about the Ban Fasa. And so the human Ban Fasa, like actual
the wise women,
and men, the Far Fasa as well. So sometimes we have men in the class,
yeah.
But also the Gaelic, the actual hag, the mythological being of the Gaelic, who I find fascinating and compelling, and a great role model for us as women, especially.
Hag is a loaded word, isn't it? It doesn't necessarily mean what it sounds like. The cultural implication here, anyway.
Well, it's so loaded. I mean, that word Gaelic, right? These days in Irish, it means a witch. It does mean a hag. It also was related to the word for a nun at one stage. It also is like the word for a spent old potato, believe it or not. All kinds of things the Gaelic can be. But there's great respect, actually, for the Gaelic in tradition. And the stories about her are amazing. And I think as a woman who's getting on in years myself and talking especially to women in their 50s, 60s, 70s and beyond, the Gaelic has a lot to teach us. She took no nonsense. I'll just say that. She's a powerhouse and took no nonsense.
I want to thank you so much. And this has been just such a pleasure. And I feel like we've barely scratched the surface, the tip of the iceberg. Would you be willing to come back?
Of course I would, Helen. It's been a real pleasure for me too.
Thank you. And I'm signing up for your Irish language class. You have to keep me abreast of
I would love that.
I'm serious. I've been desperate to learn it for many, many years, and really I didn't get very far because you do need help, you know. So.
You do need help. It's true. You can go, and I always say to people, you can go a long way with a book and some kind of recording, but it is really good to have a teacher just to ask questions.
Score.
That's
going to get you far, maybe on a Friday.
Well, I always tell people, Helen, when I was beginning to learn Irish, the only thing I could say was tá sé fuair. It's cold. That's like the one thing. So I was living in Cork at the time, and I was learning the Cork dialect. In the end, I've come to Donegal. But back a million years ago when I started, all I could say was tá sé fuair. And we went on a little holiday to Ballyferder, like our class. And we stayed in a youth hostel. And this is a million years ago in the old days. And I'm walking down the road, and a nice old fella comes up the road and says, tá sé fuair. And I almost died. I was so excited. I was like, like, yes. I was the most excited thing. It was like real Irish. It was the first moment that Irish was real for me, out of the classroom.
Person,
Oh, it's such a
And then you had to scurry away before he said something you didn't.
But lucky he was just walking on by. But that's all he had to say, tá sé fuair. And I was like, oh my goodness, I know what he meant. So it can be done is all I want to say. And we start with words like tá and tíos gur. You start with one little thing and then you add another little thing. And it's exciting and delicious.
Yes.
Blasta.
But a language
the language blasta is delicious.
Oh.
You
need someone to speak with, though. That I think is really the crucial thing. I definitely want to get in touch with you about it. And I just thought I'd let you know that I lived in Donegal.
Love Donegal. Yeah, I lived in Derry for a while, and so I loved going over to Donegal, and I spent a lot of summers in Donegal, especially at the great Irish language school, Edgescale, in Glencollamkillia. Really, I am so grateful to that school, to Liam O'Quinnigain, who's the Stúrthóir, the Banastúr there, and their vision and also their falcha. I mean, every sort of person, you're in a class with a German person and a Japanese person and a bunch of Americans and a French person, and there's just it's very exciting and it's well done. I would recommend it to anybody most wholeheartedly. I love that place. It's a beautiful place. Their method is fresh and alive, and people really learn. I learned so much from them. So
my parents went to the Gaeltech in the summers.
They did. Yes,
as children.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Such a great thing. And how we fell in love and flirted and had a great old time.
Well, they did actually knew each other when they were children, and then they reconnected when they were older, adults. So isn't that interesting? Yeah. But then my grandparents grew up next door to each other, so we have a very kind of limited dating pool.
Well, you know who you like. That'll do. That works.
That's how my cousins call me the Yank because they think that's hilarious, and they were giving me a hard time. What are you doing back here? You back here researching your family roots and looking up your ancestors and teasing me,
Yeah.
And I told them, well, I look at my living relatives. Why would I want to unearth the dead? They're all right.
Right.
Kate, thank you. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Helen.
Stick just around 1 second and let me say goodbye to everybody. Slung the foil. Thank you, everybody. And thank you to Kate.
Thank you.